Hi there, this is Outdoor Gear Chat. We're here recording episode 45. This is really exciting. They're all really exciting, but this is amazing. I'm joined as always by Cathy. It's not just that's amazing, but hi, Cathy.
Oh, I'll take that anyway. Thank
I
you
know,
very
yeah,
much,
yeah,
Ray.
yeah. You're always amazing.
Never one to pass up a compliment at my age.
Yeah.
I am Cathy Casey, and I am the owner and or co-owner and director of the Joe Brown shops in Snowdonia and the Climber shop in Ambleside. And we've obviously got a long history of being specialist outdoor retailers. And actually, as we record this year, our Ambleside shop is 65 years old. Our Welsh shops are well over 55 years old. So we're very, very proud of our pedigree. And part of our responsibility as an independent retailer, we see very much as introducing new brands into our market. So as part of that, today we are joined by Trent Bush. Welcome, Trent.
Thank you.
Hey, Trent.
And I'm going to just explain. In fact, I took this off your website because you describe yourself as a founder, director, and powder chaser.
Ah. As all people should be.
Yeah. So you are the founder and director of a brand called Artilect, which we
Yes.
are delighted to have in our shops. It's super techy with a fantastic story, and we're going to kind of delve into that on this podcast. So the brand has been born in Boulder, Colorado, which is the home of all the cool outdoor brands in America. Artilect describes itself as a team of the best minds in the outdoor clothing industry and brand building, bringing together deep experience of the past and a laser focus for the future. So it's all super exciting. So it's definitely not an easy job starting an outdoor brand from scratch. There's a colossal amount of work involved in that. But before we get into that, what led you to creating Artilect, and why did you feel that it was needed?
Great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, and I'm so excited that we're in your shops, especially with that incredible pedigree. Congratulations on all the decades and decades of success. It's funny. A lot of that is actually sort of congruent with your history. My history in the outdoors and in Boulder in particular. Like you said, Boulder is kind of an epicenter of outdoor in the US. But that isn't a new thing. That's something that's been happening for a very long time. And a lot of the US based outdoor industry actually was sort of founded or fostered, at least in Boulder, going back to my family. I'm fourth or fifth generation in Colorado and fourth generation in Boulder. And if you look back to brands that kind of came before, Hollybar, Jerry, Mountain Sports, and in particular Frostline, which was a brand my dad was involved with in the 60s and 70s. So I've been around outdoor apparel in particular, literally since birth. And it's something that it's just been kind of in my blood. And so looking back at all that time and being really, really involved in, not only those early days, but then also my own career of starting my first apparel company when I was a teenager, because it was all just second nature to me, and just continuing on a trajectory in the snow and outdoor markets for decades. I've had a chance to really dig in deep and work in particular with a lot of athletes and users and myself, my powder chasing, as we say, to just realize over time, and actually working with a lot of really big brands, just the way products are typically made, and sort of the compromises that have to be made within those product decisions. And at the end of the day, really taking a consumer-centric and user-centric focus to create products that really enhance their ability to perform in the outdoors, and not to necessarily just follow the normal rules that were kind of set out by an outdoor industry that have been the same for so long. And yeah, and so just to boil it all down, I just felt there was a real place in the market for something that really decided, a brand that really decided that performance was the driver and not any sort of preconceived notions, ideas, or conventions. And so that's where this sort of rule breaker mentality came into effect. And again, we're not breaking any rules that are set out, that are hard and fast. It's just that, again, I just working with all these materials and all these brands and all these different ways of doing things, I just thought I kind of found a better way to do it.
Yeah, I think very much so. You mentioned performance there, and I guess when I was doing a bit of research on the website, there's the area that's around performance-built technology. Just would you mind just explaining a bit more to our listeners what that's all about in your words, Trent?
Sure, and that's really just what some of what I explained of just, taking a performance outcome as the driver instead of the normal things like margin and the things that you need to do to stay in business, but it's really what could I do to create an apparel system that will deliver the performance for the users that really need it and deliver it at a reasonable price point, but really taking something that trying my best to deliver that performance and do it in a way that that adds long-term value at the same time, but not focus primarily. I mean, if in the world of outdoor, typically you start with a price point, and then you take the margin you need, and then you take the retailer margin, and then duties and shipping and all the development, and then what's left is what you get to make a product with. We started the other way, where we started with a performance outcome and built a product we thought could exceed our own expectation, and then charge what it costs. So it's a little different model, but in my mind, there's a user group out there that will actually really benefit from that. And then again, by not following the normal conventions of fabrications that we typically find in the outdoor industry, I'm actually able to deliver that performance with an actual value proposition at the same time, because we're using new and next technologies that we're developing ourselves to achieve both of those goals.
And do you make your own stuff then? Sorry, Trent. I know it's a bit off piste, is it, or do you have a supply chain that does all that for you?
We do have a supply chain, of course, and we work with some of the biggest suppliers in the world. We didn't recreate zippers, we work with YKK. It's just that we work very, very closely based on these decades of experience that I've had working with these suppliers to create our own technologies within their frameworks of manufacturing capability. The other thing that we started kind of from the beginning was an eye towards sustainability. I look at it more as kind of total responsibility. Sustainability is just part of that, but really in the chemistries we use and all the different things that we create. And so when we work on fabrics in particular, I didn't start with anything just off the shelf. I started with great suppliers that I knew and took this from over here and took this from over there and took this from over here and put it together in new ways to deliver that performance and durability and value relationship.
I think that's really key coming through in your brand, because that personal relationship element and that experience element when you're working with suppliers that are potentially halfway across the globe is absolutely key to ensuring the product that you've created at design level is actually turned into the reality that you want.
No, it's totally true. And you can't reinvent the wheel, but you can choose the partners you work with, and especially the ones that are more aligned with that same sort of mentality of performance and responsibility.
Yeah, and responsibility to workforce as well, not just to technologies and to
all the way up and down the chain. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's reading the blurb on the website as well, and how you tie all that in. The word customer centric comes up quite a lot, and just how you explained focusing on the outcomes of the product and how it works. Just to give people an idea of how this product came into our shops. It came in via your base layer line that we'll talk about in a little while, and one of your representatives came in and showed the base layer line, and we looked at it like, wow, this looks great. What's the price point? We got to that point of the conversation, and they told us the price point, and we're like, oh my gosh, that's the most expensive base layer that we would have in the shop. And being in the industry for a very long time and being very long in the tooth, we were like, oh, this has got to perform, for us to be able to stand hand on heart and discuss with customers why they should buy this product. It has got to perform. So I tried some, and I took the base layer out, and I have to say my bar was pretty high. I was like needing to be really very convinced before it could get onto the shelf. But I think probably I was pretty impressed on the first wearing. On the second wearing, I was pretty much sold. And then by the third wearing, by the time I was going out, I realized that was the base layer that ended up in my hand before I went out for a run, or if I was going backpacking. And that's my little indicator. It's like, if I haven't thought about it and I'm out doing my activity with that item on, that's a winner.
Well, that's the goal is never to have to think about it, because if you're thinking about what you're wearing, then you're not thinking about what you're doing, right? And that's a great sort of story of what we're trying to accomplish in everything that we do. And again, and the best does cost more. I mean, that's the same with cars or phones or watches or whatever it is. It's not always, costing more doesn't always equate to performance or value. Sometimes it just equates to something that costs more. And positioning, we don't want to be more expensive because we're positioned that way. We want to be more expensive we are more expensive because we feel the performance and long-term value delivers, in excess of what you pay. And that is that's the most important part. And that's the thing, looking back at my career and working with some of the other big brands I've worked with, the brand always tells the consumer, the wearer, what level of performance they're allowed to have. And so going back to your question about this sort of customer-centric or user-centric experience, that's not my job. My job is to deliver the absolute best performance outcome that I can. And that's when we talk about this sort of customer-centric sort of mentality. It's user first. It's not, what can I do to sell the most stuff? Because for sure, I could make things significantly less expensive using just the same technologies and fabrics and construction methods that everybody else uses. And then you're in a competition for marketing, who can outmarket. It may be an easier path, quite honestly, but it's not what was the point? The world has plenty of great outerwear or systems-based options. It didn't need another one that was just the same with a different name on it. And that's where we came back to that idea of really using the user-first mentality.
And I guess, as we found with other interviews, particularly that we did with Dr. Down the other day, Cathy, was that the stuff that's cheap to buy is cheap, is expensive for the planet, I guess, is how I process that in my head. And when I looked at on your website again, the Exped Dry, for example, and that responsible down standard, and again trying to link it back to the conversation we had with Matt about Dr. Down. You've got that responsibility within a number of the components that go into each of your products, I suppose, as well. So would you mind leading me down that technical thing, if you both don't mind? So we've got the likes of Exped Dry, and there was is it Primaloft Bio, was that right?
Left Bio,
As
yeah,
well. And
absolutely.
yeah, and I guess there's a bunch of those sort of
Yeah.
is it right to say brands on the website?
Yeah,
Are they
yeah,
brands within themselves?
they're supply ingredient brands for sure.
I like that.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing. If you look at literally everything we do, it's considered. And it's considered in combinations. And that's where this sort of systems-based approach, this ASYS, Artilect Systems, comes from, in that we, of course, layering is nothing new, but really thinking about apparel systems, not just where the sort of layers fit together, but really truly function together and function together in different zones, was something that, for me, in all my experience, that was the only way to supply and deliver this performance. And you can't just do that with normal stuff. So yes, Expedry, Allied Down, which is the world's largest producer of down, all the big brands for the most part use Allied, and at least in some of their line. DWR down is something that's been around forever, WR down, which is great, but it works great in the lab. Doesn't necessarily work great in real world. It works great for moisture coming, precipitation coming in. It helps to keep it dry at first, but it doesn't help, especially if you're generating a lot of heat and humidity from the inside out. And that's sort of the big difference, I think, that we do, especially with ASYS, is we protect you very well from the outside in, but we also need to protect you as well or better from the inside out. And so that's where something like an Expedry. So if you look at our Divide Fusion hoodie or jacket, that has all kinds of different materials that are purpose driven for exactly the reason you need. And so Expedry, basically, instead of taking down plumes, RDS, of course, responsible down standard down plumes, and adding a water resistant component to it, we actually use a technology called Fuse, which is gold, actual gold nanoparticles, very small amounts. So it sounds expensive. It's actually not. It's about the same price as a WR down. But basically what happens is when you get that humidity coming from the inside, or moisture from the outside, those gold particles actually vibrate at a very high frequency and actively dry your down up to 50% faster. And so what that allows you to do when you're generating that moisture from the inside, it actually will stay ahead of it'll stay dry ahead of your amount of moisture that you're giving out. So the net result is it's staying dry, and then you're keeping your insulative value at a very high level. And down is great when it's dry and lofty. As soon as it gets wet and the down insulates because of the air in between the clusters. It's not the clusters themselves and that dead air. And so the second you lose that loft, there's no insulative value. And what we do with that jacket in particular, we don't really just stop there, because if you look at the hood or under the arms or in the lower back, we actually map that in with Lavalon wool insulation, which does an even better job actively managing moisture, and it doesn't compress. So, and it's anti-odor at the same time. So we really, again, take every little piece and component and aspect, and we put it exactly where you need it, with just that user-centric mentality of moisture management and thermoregulation as the key driver. What I've found, and we've all know, I think within the last 10 years, maybe a little longer, that the level of athleticism has just gone through the roof in the outdoor market. Things like backcountry skiing, trail running, those types of things, they weren't really that prevalent until just recently. So that idea of generating that much output on the way up, especially kind of in the colder temperatures, it's a little bit newer of a construct, especially the high aerobic, and so the need to keep people dry and comfortable from the inside out is something that has only increased, while the environmental regulations have also increased, and so that has actually degraded performance. So we have to look at a lot of different ways, going back to that rule breaker sort of mentality, just don't do what everybody else has always done. How can we actually increase that user benefit through those materials and targeted materials, skin out and environment in?
I mean, this is exactly what flicks my kit nerd switch, it really does. I mean, vibrating gold particles in your damn jacket. Who knew? But I think what the sort of one of the reasons we started doing this podcast was that not all of this kind of information gets across. It's quite difficult to get all of this information across to folks when they come into the shops, and as our customers come in, we love engaging with our customers and chatting, and you can see some customers, you start going down a road and talking technical, and it's not something that they're particularly they're wanting to hear. They've got a different agenda for their shopping that particular day, but every now and again you get customers that come in and you can just throw stuff like that into the sale, and they're like, no way.
And all of a sudden something that sounds really expensive actually sounds really cheap. And going back to that jacket in particular, we use a four-way stretch, downproof by construction, down tube with that doesn't have stitch lines between it, and so it's actually stretch. It conforms to your body. It puts exactly the right temperature regulation pieces where you need it, the moisture management pieces where you need it, and it really does all come together, and it makes a big difference. And it was interesting. We were the launch partner with Allied, the global launch partner for Expedry, which was super exciting for us because here we are, this little tiny brand nobody's ever heard of, but because of the history and relationships and also they were so excited about what we were doing, we were able to do these things, and we had to get special permission to be able to even combine the Expedry down insulation and the Lavalon wool from both sides. We had to get the sort of talk them through what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it, and it made tons of sense to them as well. But you're right. I mean, if you have those customers coming in, sometimes you start talking and it just goes boom right over their head. And so this is actually kind of nice for me too, to be able to kind of talk about it more in depth. I love doing it.
I think one of the words that springs to mind for me always is that translation as well. We're talking it's almost a hyper geekery and translating that to that any customer can understand then, and what it's going to mean to them when they're wearing a piece of kit. And I just got very lost very briefly then in your merino hoodies actually when you mentioned it. So I'm going shopping for the El Dorado merino jacket now. So well worth it. I'm a massive fan of merino, and it's amazing listening to you to talk there. So it's that thermal regulation. It doesn't stink. It's it keeps me warm when it needs to. It cools me down when it needs to. It wicks the sweat away from me. And then like you're saying there, and Cathy was mentioning with your base layer as well, is that the apparel system that you've got then to make airflow, I guess, or to take moisture away from the places it doesn't need to be, or is absolutely crucial, isn't it?
It really is.
And that and I guess just talk to me a little bit more about a bit of the combination of patterning and fabrics and how the fit affects all the performance, if you don't mind. And
that's a huge contributing factor to the overall success, right? And we're one of the few brands actually in the outdoor space that doesn't just send a spec sheet to a factory and have them pattern. We actually do our patterns also from the ground up, because I don't know of any other brand that actually started with that mentality of fit and function together. And bigger brands I've worked for, those departments are completely different. The fleece department is totally different than the base layer department, is different than outerwear, and they don't actually talk or interact that much sometimes. But for us, it was absolutely critical, starting with both male and female bodies, and then starting from skin out to make sure that all the patterning, all of the technologies, everything's completely aligned and perfect, so that when you do start putting these systems together, that they don't fall apart because the fit isn't right, or that the we're taking men's patterns and trying to turn them into women's, or vice versa. We're very, very differentiated, I think, in that fact that we did start there, and we've really continued to create from that mentality and standpoint. So if you look at one of our highest end jacket, the formation jacket, if you look at the shoulder in particular, you'll see there's no armhole and there's no raglan sleeve, there's no shoulder seam. That jacket is literally put together like origami. And that's so you get the full range of motion with no hem movement, but you get that with a full system underneath it, right? You don't just get it when you're standing in the store, you get it when you're out somewhere where you need that. You don't need it on the shop floor, you need it out in the wilds. And so we take special attention and a lot of time to make sure that everything does truly fit and function together as one.
Yeah, and I think I just picked up on your website as well. Your key design team, or your director of design, is two very, very experienced ladies as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's something that comes across in the cut, when you're trying it on. But it's so great to hear that kind of patterning description, because it is something that's quite easy to miss when you're trying on so many different jackets and you're trying on hoods and you're trying to make sure it fits with your gloves. And it's easy to lose the fact that there's why aren't there any seams? How do you build a garment to fit around a 3-dimensional body without seams?
Yeah, no, it's pretty
job.
incredible. Yeah, and they're incredible. They're the experience level is out of, is higher than anybody else has, and it's not that hard to make guys stuff. The variation in body shape, and it does vary, but on the women's side in particular, that is more of an art, and Sonia and Erica are very, very good, obviously, and very experienced at that. And so that we take a lot of pride in the fact that our women's product fits. Our men's product fits great, but our women's product is really something special as well.
Yeah, and that's something that you've done we've done a previous podcast on, haven't we? With around sort of outdoor clothing providers and the women's body shape and so in, and I guess it's something that you probably pride yourself on now, Cathy, isn't it? Select the different selection that you have in store.
Yeah, I mean, as a result of those over the last few years, we've always sort of stocked 50-50 male female where we can in styles, but actually that wasn't indicative of our sales at all for a long time. But actually in the last few years, that's actually meant that our male female sales have actually come. They're not parity, obviously, but they've actually balanced up considerably, which is is really, really cool.
It's really cool, and we're about human performance, and human has no gender, right?
Yeah.
And that was when we started. We started from day one with a complete gender parity between our men's and women's styles, and not just in the number of styles, but every single technology is exactly the same. Yeah. The only difference is fit and sometimes some pocket placement. And that those really are the differences, because we don't discriminate on fabrics or performance, or again, it's just performance for people. And that's a really important piece for how we started this.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, going on from that, actually, can you explain how a product goes from concept in Boulder in America to arriving on our shelves in the UK?
Sure.
A very compacted version.
A very compact version. Well, and we kind of talked about a lot of it, right? We start with a need. We're need driven, and that's the other nice thing about being a apparel system, that we don't have to make 50,000 things and see what works. We put it into a matrix of a performance need and a tool to get there. And if in that matrix we have a product, it's going to take a whole lot to knock that product out, because we already have one. So we don't need 3 in that box, if that makes any sense. So we start with the need base. We start with and it's really a problem, and we just try to solve the problem. And that goes into the obviously the fabrications and the technologies that we put in. It goes into the patterning, who it's intended for, what it's intended for. We create those products. We go back and forth a lot with our manufacturing partners through the rounds of prototyping and sampling. We work with Mountain Equipment Research Group, which is a brand, a guy that I used to work with at Black Diamond back in the day, who is an independent field testing service. And we put the products through that rigor. And then when we feel like it's right, we pull the trigger and we make it. We work with factories primarily in Vietnam. Just that's where the best equipment, the best manufacturing really exists. And at the same time, with the best sort of human side to the process, which is also very, very important for us. We use literally the best factories on the planet. And then, yeah, of course, so that's a very brief way we do it. But my partner in the brand, Corey Taylor, with Bradshaw Taylor, of course, in the UK, it goes into the warehouses there, or into in Europe and or into the US, and then we send it out to our customers. And our customers are mainly retail partners. We don't do a whole lot of e-com. It's not a driving factor for us. We really want those retail partners who can help tell the story, like you were talking about earlier, and really, while people are trying the product on, tell them why it's different, why it's differentiated, and why it may be a little bit more expensive. That's a really important part for us. So that's a whole lot of work down into a very small amount of time. But we again, it's a process, and we take it very seriously, and we really don't want our customers to be the lab rats, as it may be said, or the guinea pigs, or whatever you want to say. We want to make sure that the product is ready before we ship it out. We're not a fast fashion brand where it's just churn, more. We're very focused on what we make, and we really make sure every product is the best it can be. It was a little more challenging during COVID because that's when we started. But again, we were able to leverage a lot of our experience and these great partners that I've worked with for decades to make sure that everything was as good as it could be.
So I mentioned earlier about my introduction to Artilect, which was via your fabulous base layers. If I see customers hovering around the stand in the shop now, I do normally sort of pop up like a weird creature and catch them unawares, or occasionally I just wander past and just say, that is life-changing base layer, and then leave them to it, and then come back like a minute or so later, and they're like, what why? And then we can explain. It is merino, but it's not merino as we know it, is it? It's something quite different. So can you explain your new yarn technology, Trent?
Sure, absolutely. And actually new yarn is really the basis of Artilect existing. We launched with new yarn as a supplier partner. And it's based on a bunch of work I had done prior to Artilect, and we actually worked with the US, the special 10th Special Forces in some cold weather performance, doing some real certain fabrications for those guys, and it's a different process. So really, if you look at merino wool, it's really one of nature's most perfect fibers when you're looking at thermoregulation and moisture management. What happens though in typical merino products, they do something that's called ring spinning to make the fabric, and actually I have a prop. So this is 18 micron super fine merino. So it's one of the most fine qualities of merino, and that's kind of where we start. And in ring spinning, you take that fiber and you just twist it into these little tiny ropes. So if you know, like a cotton t-shirt, everybody knows what a cotton t-shirt is. That's ring spinning. So it's a technology that's been around for thousands and thousands of years. Who knows even how long? The problem there is when you're making those little ropes, basically, wool does such a great job absorbing moisture from vapor level, and it will keep absorbing, and it just keeps absorbing into that core, and there's nowhere for it to get out because it's so tightly wound. And where wool has its greatest benefit is out in the wilds, a sheep out in the wilds where there's contact with oxygen. When you create those little ropes, it's very difficult to get that oxygen contact. And that's really when merino, the combination of moisture and oxygen is when it can do its living thing to actually help you thermoregulate and manage your moisture. The other problem with that is when you make those little ropes and you wind it up super tight and then you punch a million holes in it, it becomes very brittle, almost like corrugated paper. So that's why typically if you have a lot of merino product, you usually will see holes first at the seams, if you have that experience. So between getting wet and staying wet and the kind of low durability of ring spinning, and it's not the wool's fault, it's just the fault of the process typically to make it. So what we do something totally different, and we take the same 18 micron fiber, basically a 2-ply. So if you take 2 yarns or 2 strands, and then we take a high performance, this is a pen, but pretend this is polyester or nylon or even organic cotton, and create a high performance filament carrier. So we basically take that material, we wrap it very loosely twice one direction, then to parallel, and then very loosely twice the other, and just repeat. And so what that allows is a significantly higher contact with oxygen, which is why, when you talk about life changing, a lot of that life change is in the fact that you're dry, and that you're constantly, as your body's constantly giving off moisture, that base layer is able to actually manage that moisture ahead of you feeling wet for the most part. Of course, you can, if you're out trail running, something like that, you can actually make it wet, which is great because then it's actually thermoregulating, but it dries significantly faster. And that's the biggest problem I've always had with merino, is just that dry time, and then just sort of the lack of long-term durability. And so before, when we were kind of talking about performance value relationship, that value component is really important to us. We're able to not only dry 5 times faster than a ring spun merino, but the latest numbers that we've got now on durability, we're almost, the fabrics themselves can be 9 times more durable than that same fabric if we were doing it in a ring spun variety. So that equates to significantly longer lifespan. And so, yes, it costs more on the front end, but as you were saying earlier, what is the cost? The total cost. If you have to replace that 3 times, 4 times in the time it would take to replace one of our products, then our cost is significantly less, not only monetarily, but also in what it means to the planet. And at the same time, you're getting an incredible performance gain. And you probably know, but through wearing it, all the great stretch and recovery. We do all that, no spandex, no elastane. That's just the natural regain of the spiral little fibers of merino wool, stretching straight and then recovering. We're able to have more loft with less material, so that's also great. We just actually, moving forward in subsequent seasons, we will be RWS certified, so Responsible Wool Standard. Of course, right now we already meet all the standards, non-mules, all the things that we need to do, but we'll actually be certified. It's a totally different way to make merino wool, performance merino wool, and we can do it in a number of varieties, whether it's base layer, or you were talking earlier about the Sundown. I think you were talking, not the Sundown, you were talking about the Eldorado.
Yeah.
And it allows us to do different things. Like that piece in particular, it's loop back 18 micron against your skin, but then the face is 21 micron. Wool is actually naturally stronger than nylon, so we put a very durable face. So you can actually climb in that merino and rub it against granite, whatever it is, and it's going to last and last and last and last. So again, it's just the ultimate combination of performance, durability, and responsibility all at the same time.
Awesome. And I guess, if for people that are listening that might have be addicted to traditional base layers, I'm a massive advocate of merino, and as I know you are now, Cathy, from that. But yeah, it's I love this stuff. It's just remarkable, isn't it? Yeah, the properties are something else.
It is, and I'll just mention that we won Editor's Choice here in the U.S. Backcountry magazine, which is a kind of it's the leading voice in backcountry travel and backcountry skiing and splitboarding and anything sort of backcountry performance related. We won the Editor's Choice base layer. In our first year, we won ski tests with German ski magazine, with Men's Journal here in the US. I mean, over and over and over and over, we win the awards for the best. And again, that's just because of the new yarn process, and then we match it with our patterning and fit, and it equates to really the best base layer I've ever worn. And the last thing I guess I'd say on that is I still just wear prototypes from 3, now almost 4 years ago, the same set of base layer, no logos, not even our colors. It was just in our fabric developments, because I just want to see how long it can go. And I throw it in the washer. Sometimes it ends up in the dryer, and I still have no holes, nothing wrong. And that's really important, again, to that long-term durability. That product is perfectly good, so I'm not going to replace it with something a little more shiny and fresh, only because I really want to see how long it'll last and perform.
I did a grimace when you said about putting it in the dryer. Then I once put some merino gloves on a radiator, and they were like child size afterwards.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, see, I am a guy, so things end up in the dryer all the time by mistake. But I think that's the other thing, because the dry factor. I mean, like that, putting the merino gloves on the radiator, or having to hang them dry overnight and hope they're dry by morning. We don't face those same sorts of issues. I mean, our if your base layer is wet and you hang it, an hour, 2 hours later, it's completely bone dry and ready to go again. And it really is that different. And again, it's not magic. It's just science. It's just the fact that we actually have that contact with air so that it can, the moisture can evaporate. It's got a place to go. And that's really one of the main differences in what we're doing and how we do it.
Yeah, awesome. Absolutely amazing. Thanks so much for spending the time with us, Trent, today. I knew this was going to be brilliant. We have so many brilliant people that we talk to anyway, Cathy. We're really privileged, aren't we? But this has been amazing. Thank you, Trent. So that was Outdoor Gear Chat. And we were talking with Trent from Artilect. I keep getting the name wrong, sorry. And it was episode 45, so a new brand of outdoor clothing.
Yeah, so you can see our range of Artilect clothing by going onto our online shop at www.climbers-shop.com. And then in addition, we have a wealth of free to access information on our sister website, which is www.joebrownoutdooracademy.com.